Welcome, everyone, to the ASPRS Mentors Podcast. My name is Greg Stamnes, Chair of the ASPRS Early Career Professionals Council, and we also have with us Jordan Hicks, Vice Chair of the ECPC. Jordan, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I'm Jordan Hicks, and I'm a lidar specialist in North Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm really excited to hear from our guest, Ben, today. Thanks.
Thanks, Jordan. So, as Jordan mentioned, our guest this week is Dr. Ben Wilkinson. Dr. Ben, are you okay with us recording this and sharing it on various platforms?
I suppose so.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I guess to get things started, could you start by sharing your career journey and talk about how you got to where you are today? And I know you have some private industry experience, so I think that'd be an interesting story as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad to. First of all, thanks for inviting me onto your podcast. It's my pleasure to be here. Um, so I'll talk a little bit about my geospatial journey. I know our students in our program are about a split about half and half, how they found the geospatial sciences or surveying or geospatial analysis. Um, they either have a family member that was a land surveyor or involved in GIS or something like that, or it was a found major. It's about half and half. And on for me, it was my dad. So my dad was a land surveyor. He was the Bureau Chief of Surveying and Mapping for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So I was around mapping since I was a kid. Um, my earliest memories of doing surveying was a trip that my dad invited me to go on. I was probably about 14 years old, and they were doing his group was doing some hydrographic surveying around Lake Okeechobee, so down in the swampy areas of Florida, and they were uh, they were trying to figure out what routes were navigable in some like blackwater swamps down there. So they were going out there and they were taking some soundings and basically just trying to traverse through this swamp. And so my dad took me with him, stuck me in a boat. He stuck me in a ginu, if you're familiar with what a ginu is, which is basically a canoe that's cut in half. And because that area was so hard to navigate and it's just kind of so wild, they hired a bunch of locals to help them find their way through the area. So I was put in a boat with a gentleman named Smiley Jr. This is going to sound like I'm making this stuff up. But I was put in a boat with this guy named Smiley Jr. in a canoe with about a 45 horsepower motor. So going around this swamp area, just hauling it. It's basically a dirt bike on water. Um, Doing hydrographic surveying. I was like, this is what my dad does. This is what land surveying is. It's kind of cool. So that was my first introduction to it. Um, I ended up during high school, and I would take summer jobs at a place called the Florida Resources and Environmental Analysis Center, which was at Florida State University, where I was copying digital ortho quarter quads from tape onto CDs. So transferring everything to CDs so we could serve that data. And also there, I was started to get into coding a little bit, developing GUIs that were helping serve that data to the public. So I did have some geospatial stuff before I went to college. When I did enroll at the University of Florida, I still didn't really know what I want to do. So I was kind of testing the water with different things. I was an anthropology major at one point. I was a psychology major at one point, and I was undecided liberal arts major at one point. So just kind of chilling out in college, not sure where my path was going to lead me. At the same time, I was taking a bunch of math classes because I liked math. So I ended up taking the full course of calculus. And eventually I did go meet with Dave Gibson, who was the founding director at the University of Florida. And just, if you talk to any land surveyor in Florida, they know who Dave Gibson is. So he was foundational to our programming and our program here and surveying in general in the state of Florida. So I met with him. He's a great salesman. He was telling me about these cool new things called, this cool thing called GPS and lidar and all this stuff. He said, math, computers and being in the outdoors. So I joined the geomatics program at UF. At the same time, I minored in computer science, so ended up taking a lot of programming classes as an undergrad. When I graduated from the geomatics program, I went to work for kind of had an in because they were housed here at the University of Florida, but I worked at the National Center for Airborne Laser Mapping. So we had a Optech 3100. Maybe some folks listening will remember that system, but we were cooking at about 30 kilohertz pulse repetition rate, and so I did some processing with that group and spent a lot of time as an operator. So I was in the aircraft pressing the button to fire the laser for missions from California, Utah, Montana, Massachusetts, Florida. So kind of all over the place. And so that gave me an exposure to sort of state-of-the-art technology and some of the really interesting applications that there are for geospatial data. So I was there for about a year. And I ended up, working with a lot of grad students and decided that I did want to go to grad school. And I really enjoyed the classes that I took from Bon DeWitt, who's a photogrammetry professor here at UF. And so I talked to Bon and asked him, how do I get into a graduate program at UF? And he said, well, you're doing the first step right now. I remember him saying that exact thing. So I did end up getting into to the master's program at UF, where my research was in this other new thing called drones, or small unmanned aerial systems. And at that time, it was a group here at UF called the UAS research program, the UF UAS RP, which was a group that was a collaboration between geomatics, aerospace engineering, and the wildlife co-op here. So the main application that we had with that group, that group's still around, varying degrees of activity, but the main application there was counting wildlife, or applications to wildlife. So there in my master's degree, I was doing some very early UAS photogrammetry, and this was before Pixfeed 40 and Metashape. So we were developing our own software to process the data, and that really gave me a good foundation for photogrammetry and programming photogrammetry. So yeah, I kept on doing it, stayed in school, studying towards a PhD. When I shifted to PhD, I shifted my focus to lidar. Still working with Bon. Bon was still my mentor, along with another professor here, Dr. Mohammed. And so I did all that, and I graduated, and I got to the end of my graduate career here at UF, and I realized that I hadn't really planned on what the next step was. So luckily for me, I did find a job posting, and this is my only foray really into private industry. So I found a job opening at a company called Integrity Applications Incorporated, which was in Chantilly, Virginia. And it turns out that I really lucked out because the group there is absolutely phenomenal. So I got to work with a lot of just expert photogrammetrists, a lot of Purdue grads, some folks from UF were there. A lot of the Ed McHale's students were at this company. So it turned out to be just a really great place to learn and do some really interesting cutting edge work. So I was there for a couple of years, and then a position opened up back here at UF, and I applied for that and eventually got the position. And so for the last 10 years or so, I've been a professor at the UF Geomatics program here at the University of Florida, teaching photogrammetry classes and drone mapping classes and all kinds of interesting stuff. So that's my path.
Cool. So started as Florida man and then went around and now still a Florida man.
That's right. Still Florida man, through and through.
Right on. So Who have your mentors been? I mean, you mentioned a few of them. Is there any other ones that stick out for over the years?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you know, perhaps my family members, like my dad. Um, I would say Bon DeWitt's been my main mentor throughout my journey. As a from undergrad, and I just had a really nerdy conversation with him this morning. So he's been really my constant mentor throughout this whole journey. And more recently, I would say that Amr Abdul Rahman has been a really good uh, person for advice. I mean, he's a mentor for sure, and it has sort of helped me um, help me find that path forward um, in academia. You know, he's a few years ahead of me, so he's kind of seen a little bit more than me. But he's been really good for advice. Yeah, those two guys.
Awesome. So you've been involved with ASPRS for a few years. Can you talk about the roles you've held within the organization and how they've influenced your career?
Sure. Yep. So I've been in and around the ASPRS for quite a long time. Um, so most recently, I was the director of the photogrammetric applications technical division. Just handed that over to Hank Thies this year. So did work there. Um, I'm the faculty advisor for the student chapter of ASPRS here at the University of Florida, and that's something that we're trying to bolster that up lately. So that's been our task here at UF. Um, I've served on various committees. So the Best Paper Awards committees a couple times. Fairchild Award committee, which is part of my duties as the PAD director, scholarship selection committees, and I also work with some of the um, certification stuff for UAS mapping. So,
So have you yourself won any awards from ASPRS over the years?
I have won some awards. Thanks for asking, Greg. Yes, the first award I got from ASPRS was a scholarship. So I got the Paul Wolf Scholarship back when I was in grad school, and that's to encourage people to teach in the geospatial industry. So that one worked out quite well. So good job, ASPRS. You encouraged me, and now I'm doing it. Um, I've won some papers, some Davidson paper awards for three different journal articles. So three different, very different, disparate articles. One on lidar, one on drones, and one related to my master's work, photogrammetry. And this year, I received the presidential citation for kind of getting the pad back in shape. So developing a charter and operating procedures for them. And yeah, those are some of the awards I've gotten. Very, very nice.
Perfect. Thank you. That's good that the teaching award worked out.
Yeah,
Um,
sure did. Good scholarship.
so can you talk about the UAS certificate program at the University of Florida and what is it and how did it come about and what makes it unique?
Sure. So we have two certificates here at the University of Florida. One's the graduate certificate in UAS mapping, and one's undergrad certificate in UAS mapping. And we started both of those certificates back in 2016. I say we, it was me and another professor here named Grenville Barnes. And, back then, almost 10 years ago, it was pretty new technology still, and folks weren't really sure that it was going to be used. So, us going through the process of creating new courses and creating a certificate at a university, it's not a trivial task to do. So we were really betting that the technology would stick around, and that it would be used extensively by our graduates. So we did develop it. Part of it was reorganizing a class that was already in existence here, and that class is now called Foundations of UAS Mapping. And in that course, we focus on the theory and collection and processing of UAS data. So everything that goes into generating a map using a drone. The second course is a practicum. That foundations course as a prerequisite, and the practicum is a really intensive field lab. So it's a 2 week, all day. I don't think it's every day anymore. It used to be all day, every day, for 2 weeks. Now you get the weekend off. But it's an intensive field lab where you're basically given a problem to solve with drone mapping. And then students go out and collect the data, do all the processing, and present the results at the end of it. And it's usually two different areas of interest or regions of interest. And that's lately that's been a location here on campus. So we'll survey a location here on campus where it's a built environment, buildings and stuff like that. And for the past few years, we've been going to this class is led by a professor here named Evan Broadbent, who has a huge amount of experience collecting drone data. He's probably flying a drone right now. That's the kind of person that this is. So great experience to lead that course. And he takes the students out to a place called Seahorse Key, which has he's talking about Florida, man. It has the largest concentration of cottonmouth snakes. Maybe it doesn't anymore, but it did at one point have the most cottonmouth snakes of anywhere in the world. So we'll take the students out there for a nice stroll on the beach to collect. You've been out there, Greg. But yeah, we'll take the students out there and map that entire island, which is changing shape due to storms and various other factors. So that's second class. And then third class is applications of UAS mapping, where we focus on, typically students will have the technical background coming into that class, and they'll see some of the various applications that can use that drone data. And we'll invite speakers like yourself, Greg, and like one of our guests here, Michael Detweiler, to speak in that class. Basically, experts from all over the world will come in and speak to that class. We get folks from private industry, from academia, and we always have federal agencies. So this year we had a speaker, for example, from the U.S. Forest Service come in to talk to the students about how they use drones. So it's a good class. It's a guest lecture based series and discussion based, and it tends to be very good. So those are the three classes that make up our certificate. And so far, yet I agree with you. It has been a successful endeavor. We've had 63 students go through the entire certificate program. And we always have, a good roster that are taking the classes at any time. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for the info. To switch gears a little bit. So when we first started this podcast, we didn't really know what we're doing. And now, obviously, we're seasoned experts. But when we first started making questions to ask people, we just had a brainstorming session, and we'd always ask people the same questions for the first few episodes. And one of those was, what's your favorite book related to geospatial science? And people they'd open up just like I'm doing right now, you can't see, but they'd open up their little bookshelf in their office, and they would pull out Elements of Photogrammetry. And almost everybody mentioned that book, and eventually we're like, well, we can't just have 100 people keep mentioning Elements of Photogrammetry. So we quit asking that question. And even after we quit asking it, people would still pull out that book and show it to us during the podcast. So you're co-authoring the next edition and the previous edition of that book, Elements of Photogrammetry. How did that first come about? How did Bon first approach you about that? And what major changes or updates can we see in the next edition? And Ryan Brazil wants to know, when is it available?
Ryan Brazil wants to do that. Okay. Well, so my involvement in that's one of my favorite books too, by the way. My involvement in that book started in grad school with Bon DeWitt, who's obviously one of the authors on that book, and his advisor was Paul Wolf at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So he invited me to be a co-author on there, I think he just wanted to pawn off some of the effort onto somebody else, and I happened to be the nearest person to him. So he asked me to help him write some of the chapters in there, and so I obviously said yes, and began working on that at the end of my PhD and through some of my work in industry. Um, so yeah, that last edition, I think it came out. It might be exactly 10 years ago now. So it was obviously time for a rewrite, and some of the main changes that you're going to see in there are going to be related to the hardware. So everything has since just totally shifted to digital, and the new large format cameras are quite different than they were even 10 years ago. Hardware is changing quickly, so a lot of the updates are going to be related to that stuff, that shift to digital. There's going to be a full chapter on drones, on UAS mapping, and the various idiosyncrasies of doing photogrammetry from those small platforms, and best practices there. Luckily, most of the math is the same. So, a bundle adjustment is still pretty much the same bundle adjustment that it has been for so many decades. We are going to bring in some stuff on, some more stuff on digital image processing. So, one of the big leaps in photogrammetry has been the approach to automatic pass point generation. So we're gonna talk more about feature-based matching and the technical aspects of that, along with some other computer vision structure for motion concepts that have just found their way into what you might call classical photogrammetric software or methodology. So that's the broad view of what some of the changes are. It's going to be a pretty extensive revision compared to the previous one. But one of the things that Bon and I are trying to do with this new edition is to keep the keep the way that Dr. Wolf had it. I don't know how else to put that, but he just seemed to have a way with words, and make complex things seem simple. So that's something that I really love about the book and some of the original language in that book, and that's something that we're going to try to continue to keep in there. So that's a real balancing act, which is treating the subject with rigor and technical correctness, and at the same time making it understandable to everybody. So that's something that we're gonna maintain there. When is it going to come out? It probably won't be for a while. So it will probably go into copy edits by next year. So probably somewhere next year, which means it probably won't be released until the year after next year. So that's what we're looking at pipeline wise.
Okay, I'll set a reminder so I don't keep asking you that question. So one of the other things that we often talk about or ask guests about is related to coding languages, and how important learning that skill is for your geospatial career. So where do you rank that skill in terms of essential skills? And what's your favorite language? And what are your thoughts about the rise of generative AI? And does that pose a risk to that skill, or does it enhance it?
Well, I think that having the ability to write code in any language is going to basically raise the ceiling of your ability to do all kinds of stuff. So for me, at least in academia, not really looking at from a production standpoint, but more from like a research standpoint, is your ability to write code allows you to test an idea very quickly. Instead of, because it allows you to streamline any kind of repetitive task. Whereas if you weren't able to code, you would be building up probably very large Excel spreadsheets or something like that, or doing computations by hand or whatever. But the ability to code just gives you that It just gives you an avenue to test your ideas quickly to see if it's feasible or not. Um, so I would say it's a pretty important skill, at least from the standpoint of academia. I think that going out to private industry, folks going out into industry are going to have a wide range of careers and tasks that they have to do within industry. But I can certainly see certain portions of those folks really benefiting from being able to code. Um, is generative AI going to take over? Uh, I don't know. Maybe. I think the at this point for sure, you can generate code, but you still have to have some knowledge about computer programming to be able to vet whatever the machine learning algorithm is spitting out. So certainly not now. I don't think it poses a risk at the moment. Although I have seen recently at some international conferences some pretty impressive natural language processing to basically build code for GIS applications. Favorite programming language? Well, I started out in C, so C has a special place in my heart. C and C++ back in the olden days, and I do remember first hearing about Python and thinking that that's baby stuff and it's just a scripting language. And you know, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to work with the little scissors, the little plastic scissors that you give a toddler when you can use a scalpel, right? But I've definitely changed my mind about that, and pretty much everything I do is in Python now, just because of the huge amount of libraries that are available to you and just the portability of it. But really, I would say, to folks who haven't started coding, you probably want to start with Python. But at the end of the day, if you learn one programming language, you're going to be able to easily learn another one. I mean, the concepts are going to be so simple and portable that whatever you do, you're going to have some skills in coding, whichever language you choose. It can cross languages quite easily.
So, what other essential skills do you think there are for early career professionals? And are there any skills that are just as important for those who are more established in their careers?
Um, so for early career professionals, I think I I personally place a lot of value on communication skills, and that doesn't that just it's the ability to communicate and the the impetus, I guess, to communicate, or you know actually talking to people, and going on, not being shy, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And that's something that I've had to work on throughout my career, and I wish I was better at that earlier on in my career. But I would say communication is a big one, and is truly valuable. That, along with collegiality, so particularly in so just being able to work in teams is really important, I think. I think that the geospatial industry is super small, and the folks that you meet uh, along the way that are involved in geospatial stuff, you're probably going to see them for the rest of your career. So it's good to be nice to people and work well with others. Um, have come with the philosophy that everyone has value, and everyone has something to contribute, and put that philosophy forward when you interact with other people. I think it's really important. Skills that are important for early career professionals and those that are already in established careers. Was that the question? Okay. I'm not talking about any technical things here, but I would say that something that's really important is a work-life balance, which I'm pretty sure that exists. but I think that's something to definitely strive for. Um, I think that there can be, you can get into some companies or organizations where there's a real culture of just, um, I mean, I don't want to say overworked, but putting everything into the job. And I see that a lot, and burnout is a real thing. I see the kind of stress that's put on some of our students, and as they go out into their careers, some of the stresses that they get from their jobs. And I think it's important to try to maintain that work-life balance, and to have some sort of governor or threshold, uh, hold yourself accountable for your own health. So really making sure that you take care of your well-being, along with doing a good job at work, is important. So that's an essential skill, I would say.
That's a good one. We've had a lot of, I guess you could call them grinders as guests on the podcast
Yeah,
that were like work 18 hours a day, and when you're done work, write books and do like it's just
sure.
it's overwhelming, and it
Yeah,
doesn't take long to find yourself in that situation where you're kind of the scale is heavily weighted towards the work,
yeah.
and you don't have too much of a life.
Yeah, and that kind of, I mean, I got nothing against grinding. I just think you have to be careful not to overgrind. I think that's really my point. So just be aware of your own health, mental health, and physical health as you move forward.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's awesome advice. So switching gears, and maybe this is applicable to not having to grind anymore, but how do you see machine learning contributing to the evolution of the geospatial industry or geospatial science, particularly in areas like lidar and photogrammetry?
Yeah. I think it's already contributed to the evolution of the geospatial industry, and I think it will continue to do so. I mean, um, so certainly at the analysis end of things, where, for example, classification of data sets, it's already being used quite a lot. Um, I mean, I could see it becoming parts of every part of geospatial data, from the planning to the collection to the initial processing, all the way to the exploitation. Um, we're seeing some interesting research here at UF, even just on the collection side. So the use of machine learning, or machine learning algorithms, um, to make the collection portion more efficient. So I think one of the things that needs to be addressed in geospatial industries is the huge amount of data that we have to work with. And that's, even the raw data that we're collecting can be a lot. And if we want to look towards miniaturizing the technology, then we need to make the collection of that data more efficient. And I think that machine learning can play a role in that. So things like prioritizing certain areas of interest within the data set, and that's the portion that we carried forward. I think um, that we can use machine learning algorithms for that, the initial collection portion of that, for the processing of the data, for the storage, compression algorithms, speeding everything up. Um, I think so that's just, sort of like the beginning of the pipeline of geospatial data. But then on, sort of the end of it, we also have these data sets. And, I work a lot with lidar, and you look at a lidar point cloud, and there seems to be so much information in those point clouds, that we're not exploiting. And we know we know that there's something there, but even as like a human looking at a point cloud with however many millions and millions of points, it's hard to extract all the information out of that point cloud. And I think that machine learning uh, will will help us extract more meaningful information from the point cloud that can be used for all kinds of different applications. So I will say that even though I think that you know machine learning has an important role in the future of geospatial data, I think we have to be careful to still keep in mind or still make sure that we still have the uh, foundational knowledge that's enabled the technology in the first place, which is our physical models and our analytical approaches to collecting the data. So that I think that's still an important foundation. We shouldn't just put all of our eggs in the machine learning basket. We should still, remember the basic stuff, which is based on physics, not some black box that gets a cookie whenever it gets the answer right. So a balance of the two, I think, is where I would like to see things go.
So the next question came about as from one of our discussions, just like that we don't record, I guess, our weekly meeting discussions. And somebody mentioned, could we have a guest on that like deals with photogrammetry and GIS? And I thought, well, they're not like mutually exclusive. Like you almost have to be good at GIS to be, if in the production world, I guess, or like analysis world. So, so in your opinion, how important is it for professionals working in fields like aerial mapping, for example, collecting lidar or photogrammetry, mobile mapping, or terrestrial laser scanning to have those GIS skills? And can you differentiate between like GIS and other aspects of geomatics, or do you think they're all kind of intertwined?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Um, yeah, I think it's important to have at least some GIS skills. And uh, because that is where most of whenever whenever the data gets, like I said, down that pipeline and it gets to the user, they're usually going to be exploiting it via GIS. So you need to have some understanding there of what the end user, how the end user is going to view the data and how they're going to exploit the data. So in that aspect, yes, I think you need to have some sort of GIS skills, at least a good basic foundational understanding of GIS. I think it works the other way too. I mean, that's sort of I kind of wish that the folks who were exploiting the data via GIS also had an understanding of photogrammetry. I kind of see it both ways. And I agree that in a perfect world, you would have expertise in both to best use the data.
Perfect. Well, that's good to hear. We'll pass that on to the group. So that wraps up my scripted questions. I did think of one while you were talking about your career journey. This, um, do you have any tips so you were collecting data in an airplane in Colorado. Do you have any tips for motion sickness or air sickness and also heat and cool in the airplane? Um,
Um, no, I think I'm just blessed with the ability to just deal with it, and I think that was one of the reasons that I actually got that job. Was I did do a test flight in the aircraft that we used, which was a Skymaster, and you can look up what a Skymaster looks like. But it's quite a stable, small aircraft, but still, when you are flying around in the mountains, you can have lots of bumps and dips and feelings of weightlessness. Um, as far as any tips for that, I don't know. So we've got to be some good drugs out there, but you probably don't want to be taking those drugs regularly to stave off the nausea. But yeah, I don't know. Stare at the horizon. Put your head between your legs. As long as you can still fire that laser, that's the important part.
Make sure that the sensor is acquiring data and then figure out the rest later.
Exactly.
Perfect. All right. Well, do we have any? Is Yusuf still here? He usually likes to. Oh yeah, he's here. He usually likes to ask a live question. But other than that, I don't have any more. But thank you so much for doing this. A lot of insights into your career that were very interesting that I didn't know. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, that would be via email. So benew@ufl.edu.
Perfect. Thank you.
I got a couple of questions, Dr.
Go for it, Michael.
Hey, you mentioned the Optec 3100. I remember that one. That was a good one. Did you guys by chance ever install that system in an airplane for Mark Inc.? Does that ring a bell?
It does ring a bell.
Because I remember an employer I used to work for. We had to rip our sensor out of the airplane because they told me the University of Florida was in town, and that was their 3100 sitting over there in the hangar.
Yeah.
And then my employer used to get all upset, like, how are they university competing against us? That's not fair.
Yep. Sorry about that. Was it a Navajo?
Yes, it was a Navajo. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
It wasn't my decision, I promise.
Does Raymond, Mississippi ring a bell? Were you ever in Raymond, Mississippi?
Yes. Is that south of Jackson? Maybe.
Yes, it is.
Yep. So
Okay, all right.
that would be the area.
Well, that's funny. Our paths crossed long ago.
Yeah, that is funny. I'm telling you, the geospatial industry is tiny. It is like that. I mean, you're gonna find connections between everybody. Oh yeah, that's a great example of that. So sorry we took over your aircraft. It wasn't, like I said, not my decision.
Yeah, it wasn't my decision either, so it's all good. I had one more serious question. What is it like to write a book, like a textbook? I mean, that I've obviously used a couple for studying for certifications, and I've had to write a couple of white papers that are only a page or two long, and put together some slideshows for some presentations. But I couldn't even imagine putting together a textbook. What's your thoughts and experience on putting together one of those?
Well, it's a lot like teaching. So I teach a lot of undergrads, and you can't really, well, you can't really get away with just knowing more than your audience. You have to know the subject to a degree where you're so confident in it that you can really break it down and explain it simply. So that's been my experience with the textbook and teaching in general, is that you really have to know the subject. So it's tricky and it's time consuming, because you're digging into a lot of source material and trying to understand things, so that you can properly and correctly explain them at a basic level. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, sounds about right. That's what I thought, is like, wow, you're really putting yourself out there as an expert.
Yeah.
A little bit of obviously your confidence in your abilities would probably be a good asset, huh?
Yes. Yes. And if you're not confident, you better get confident. So there's a lot of studying that goes into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got a quick question. Where do you get one of these water dirt bike things?
Oh, a GNU?
Yes,
Oh, all you
that is
gotta do
awesome.
is buy a GNU and just strap a
Huge
outboard
motor.
motor on it that's just way too big. That is inappropriately too
Yeah,
big.
yeah,
I mean that trip was so interesting because the like I said, the people that were guiding us around that area, it's like they live on the swamp and they're out there and you know, you're lost 5 minutes into it. You got no idea where you're going uh through this swamp area and they know exactly where they are. And that makes you feel very um what's the word? Very nervous, maybe I guess is the word, but they're like, they can live out there.
yeah.
They can hunt for food. They know where that lemon tree is, so they can season the venison, and it's like they're living there.
Yeah, too cool.
Exciting times.
I have a question.
Dr. Kadura.
Yeah, I came to I thought I knew your journey since we spent a lot of time together, but I learned a lot today about your geospatial journey. Very interesting and very inspirational.
Yeah,
And the way that Dave Gibson played a key role, you know? I know he played a key role at the Florida level and maybe national level, but I never thought that he was, he contributed to your path.
yeah, he absolutely did. And I definitely mention him as one of my mentors for sure. Just having worked with him at UF. I mean, he's my teacher here at UF for like all my undergrad courses.
Yeah, excellent. My question is about the advancement of technology. What do you think is the most interesting thing or application for photogrammetry when the future and the way technology is advancing, autonomous vehicles, augmented reality, gaming? So, what do you think is going to be something that will make I would say a more significant impact on the daily life, not only in the mapping industry where photogrammetry can be applied?
Um, that's a good question. You're asking me to look into my crystal ball again. I think that I'm constantly amazed by the miniaturization of the hardware and how it gets integrated into personal devices. So for sure, I think that'd be a big part of it. And that's sort of the culmination of advances in the technology, in the hardware, and also the software and algorithmic approaches. Both of those things go into the miniaturization of technology, and so that we can have these high quality, accurate sensors, high resolution, high precision that are going to be much smaller, on just everywhere. Although I did know, I say that the technology is going to be everywhere, and be able to use photogrammetry and lidar and all these, perhaps radar and all these other sensors, and be integrated into um, devices that are used by everyday folks. But I've been watching lots of Star Trek recently, and I noticed that in Star Trek: The Next Generation, there's like 0 cameras on the ship. Did anybody notice that? And I think they could solve most of the problems just by having like cameras. They don't have any cameras. Sorry, that's a real divergence, I know, but that's
So it's
all the
there's
information I've had recently.
no, I'm just saying, how do they do the recognition and everything? Is it sensor based? They plant sensors inside everybody's.
Yeah, but they always lose people on the ship. They're like, where is this person? And I'm like, they could just install cameras on the ship. So maybe it's a privacy issue or something like that. I don't know. But I've just noticed that recently, that they could solve all their problems with photogrammetry.
Yeah, they take privacy very, very seriously in that galaxy universe.
Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think as well.
Yeah.
When I was working with assisted living and senior people, we were doing research, and one of the ideas was for senior people who live by themselves and they need help, caregiver have a part-time job. Why don't we add a camera and the caregiver will be able to look at it? And that was a big no. Nobody wants to have, because behavior will change. That's what something they mentioned. When there's a camera, you will not live the normal life that you have, even at your home, even if you know that family members are looking at it. So everything will change.
Well, I think that that's all interesting stuff, and it brings up a lot of interesting things to think about. Where everybody has these basically data collectors in their pockets and all around them, and as an old guy like me, I find that weird, but I see the young people that are all around me, it is totally normal, and they are totally okay with it. It seems like, so it's just a slow shift in the culture that we're seeing. But
One last question. Why the 3D TV, 3D everything keep coming and disappearing and it's not there yet for everybody?
yeah, I don't know, Yusuf. I think it loses its novelty kind of quickly. I know that I did have a 3D monitor at home and used it for video games for a while, and it was like, this is pretty cool for a while. And then it's like you kind of want to shift to something else. But it seems like VR may there you go. Rick's got the anaglyphs on. I like it. But it seems like, virtual reality headsets could be something that does catch on. We'll see.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Yusuf.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks everyone for the discussion. Greatly appreciated. Yeah, I look forward to rewatching this episode. And yeah, thanks again for showing up.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.